Well, hey, good morning. Welcome to Wake Up to Revelation, where we're going through the book of Revelation, verse by verse. The book of Revelation is written to us. It is literally a letter to us, a book to us, to show us what's going to take place, specifically so we could have some forewarning, so we can be ready, so we can put things into action, because there's a lot of calls for action in the book of Revelation. And where we are in this book is we've hit this place where John is on the island of Patmos and Jesus appears to him amongst 7 lamps. And he tells him to write in a little book to the 7 churches. And we're going to kind of focus on the book itself today. So we're just going to pick it up where we left off. Revelation 1, starting verse 10. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice as of a trumpet, saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. And what you see, write in a book and send it to the 7 churches which are in Asia. All right, I'm going to pause there real quick. We focused on the 7 churches last time. We're going to focus on the book because I don't want to confuse really anything about this book. Like, this is not just a simple write it in a book. What this book is very, very, very significant. So I want to kind of just focus on that piece of it today. And I want to start with, we only use the Bible as a reference. So we're going to go to the very end of Revelation to kind of talk about the importance of this book of Revelation here. So we're going to go to Revelation 22, starting in verse 18. For I testify to everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to these things, God will add to him the plagues that are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part from the book of life, from the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book. It's a pretty solid copyright stamp, so to say. And I want to kind of just talk about, as Jesus says, write in this book. And then at the end it says, if anybody messes with this book, you're going to get the plagues and you're out of heaven. Like, that is huge. You might as well just take the mark of the beast, honestly. So I want to start by saying, when it comes to this book, there's a couple pieces I want to address here beyond that. Number one, I do not take that lightly. I truly don't take that lightly. This is the second time I've gone through Revelation verse by verse on this channel. And the first time I delayed a long time because I was afraid of that. When Jesus says write in this book, whatever is in it, you got to take it to heart. You can't, start making stuff up, obviously. You can't take pieces out you don't like. And it was really hard for me because there's a lot in here that a lot of people have, I believe, wrong. There's a lot of things in here where people are like, oh, that means this or that means that. I'm like, that is not what that means. So I prayerfully try to cross-reference it with the Word of God as best I can and say, well, according to what it says here, that's what that means. So I just want to kind of give that disclaimer that at least I'm trying, like, my heart is to not get all these plagues and be taken out of heaven. That is not my goal in this. More so, I'm going to do everything I can to avoid that. So please hear my heart that I am trying my hardest as we go through this book that Jesus just told John to write, that eager to make sure that in my heart I'm not taking out or adding, if that makes sense. Like if I take out or add, I didn't mean to. I was trying my hardest not to. And I guess I share that because if I say something that's wrong, like obviously my heart is not to deceive, so to say. And I think that's really what that disclaimer is. Obviously, interpreters are going to get things wrong. And regardless of what I think I know about this book, like if you put the depth of knowledge as a 6-foot stack of paper that one might have on this book, I maybe got about like that, you know. And the depths of God's knowledge can fill a sea, you know, with words. It's, I don't even want to limit to that. So I share all that because please know that as I go through this, I understand what is at stake. I do. I want to understand what the risks are. I do. And I'm not willing to take them in any way, shape, or form. So my goal is, to the best of my ability, to get it right. And there's going to be a lot of things in here that you're going to think, well, wait a second, I've heard other people say that's this other thing. And that's why I'm going to always cross-reference it with the Bible. I find that incredibly important to do. So when Jesus says what you see right in a book, I do not take that lightly. And the other piece that I want to kind of address about this book that John is writing now is that you can't read it like a story where this thing happens, then this thing happens, then this thing happens, then this thing happens. You can't read it like that. Because what you're seeing is oftentimes you'll see something in a chapter and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But then you see that same thing from a different view. Maybe it's an angel explaining it in a different chapter, or an angel saying, okay, like now let's look at it this way. Like you see it in multiple ways. Like they might give an example of something that is like a figurative thing, like the dragon. And then they show it elsewhere and they're like, well, here's, this is what that is. Like, here's the reality of what that thing is. Like, we showed you the image of what it is, but here's actually what it is. The Bible is filled with that. I often say that, that there's so many things in the Bible that some are figurative. Like, they're not literal, they're figurative. Like the beast. A beast is not going to come out of the sea. But a beast system is coming from humanity, so they show the beast, but then they show actually what it is. In reality is what we would see here on earth. Like, here's a figure of what it is, and here's what we'll see as literal. So there's things that are figurative, and then there's things that are literal. It is what it says. No ands, if, or buts about it. That's what it says. That's what's going to happen. So you kind of got to know the difference between, and God is very good at making it obvious, and he's very good at saying, well, that thing you saw, here's what it is. Just like we just saw in the last episode with the 7 churches and the 7 lampstands. It just a few verses later, Jesus like, here's the mystery of those 7 lampstands. They are this. They are the church. So I just want to kind of get that clear that you can't read it like a book, because if you go from chapter 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, you're kind of going to bounce back and forth, if that makes sense. So you have to prepare your heart to read something and then have a deeper understanding of it in a future chapter, and it doesn't play out. The whole book does not play out in order, if that makes sense. Of course, it's in the perfect order. And, obviously the first trumpet's going to come first and the 7th trumpet's going to come 7th. Those are coming in order, but when you read in chapter 4 about a thing, you might see that same thing in chapter 15. So it's not a different thing, it's just given a different view of it. And sometimes you have to see, because what Jesus literally just said is what you see right in a book. And what he's going to see is sometimes he's seeing things on the island of Patmos. Then he's taken up in the Spirit, and then he's seeing those same things from the throne room of God. That's a whole different view. And then he's seeing things in the sea in the throne room of God, and that's a different view. And then he's seeing things because an angel took him somewhere else, and he sees that same thing, but a totally different view. So you also have to understand that we're basing this off what John is seeing and hearing. And so we have to really kind of get that you can't just, I think a lot of people want to open up the book of Revelation and go, oh, well, this is going to happen first, and this is going to happen second, and this is going to happen third, and just read it, and. But if we go back to Revelation 1:3, blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy. And what he's saying is you're blessed if you read it, and and if you hear it, like you get it, like I get this. So it's not for all people. It's specifically for us. Go back to Revelation 1:1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants things which must shortly take place. It's us. We're the servants. So it's not for everybody. It's not. And I mean, it should be. And I'm sure I'm certain God's heart is that everybody should get this. Like everybody's heart should be for Jesus Christ and get it. But as you read, not everybody's heart is. Most of the earth is deceived. And when you just simply read it, like because I hear all the time people say, well, I read the Bible from beginning to end, and I didn't, I'm still an atheist. I didn't see anything in there. I read Revelation from beginning to end. Well, it probably wouldn't make a lot of sense if you read it from beginning to end, just once especially. Like I remember the first time I read Revelation, none of it made sense. None of it. I might as well have been written in Chinese. None of it made sense to me. And it wasn't until, I kind of describe it this way. It's like walking into a pitch black room, and at first you're just, I have no idea what's going on in that room. But eventually you're feeling around, and maybe you get a candle lit, and you kind of see a little bit of what's going on in that room. But the more you study out, by the time the lights are on bright, and you look around and go, oh, that's that, that's what that is, that's what that is. Like it really kind of gives you this ability to understand the more you dig. It's just like Jesus said in 20, the mystery of the 7 stars. They're a mystery. And, we're just still in chapter 1. We're already hitting mysteries, like these are mysteries that you have to kind of study out. So I just want you to just be encouraged that there's going to be a day where the lights are on bright and it all just makes perfectly good sense to you. But you have to dig. You have to dig through this book. You have to cross-reference it with the Bible. When you see a figurative thing and an angel says, well, what that is this thing, you kind of have to put the two together. You have to say, well, that thing was that thing, So it just can't be read like a fictional book, where you just kind of chapter 1 and then it ends in chapter 25. Like that's not, you can't do that. It does have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but it's from different angles at different times. And when you pull it all together, you can say, well, this is what happens first. And so, that you can set out a timeline. Like you can safely set out a timeline. I'm just saying that if you just read the book, it doesn't follow that timeline. It kind of bounces around. And we will, of course, do a timeline early on. We will do a timeline. As soon as he's taken up into the throne room of God, we will definitely be breaking out a timeline and supporting it with scripture and prophecy and all that. And even in the book of Revelation, you have to consult the old prophets. Like you have to go to Daniel, you have to go to Jeremiah, You have to go to Ezekiel. You have to go to Zechariah. You have to go to Malachi. You have to go to the old prophets to really, truly understand what is going on here. Because if you're studying it verse by verse, like if you really study, which is what we're doing, then every word matters. And every word, there's some things that just mentions once in Revelation. And you're like, well, I don't even know what that means. But there's like 5 other prophets that talked about it. So you can go and look at that. So it's important to, because God is not the God of confusion. He's not. He's a God of clarity. But I believe this is written to his servants. And I believe his servants have discernment. I believe his servants have the Holy Spirit. I believe that his servants, when asked for wisdom, he says yes. And that's why, we're so blessed when we read and we hear the words of this prophecy. We're blessed because of it. That's an incredibly important piece. So when Jesus says, what you see, write in a book, this book is not like any other book. And most of prophecy, well, I won't say most, as far as a timeline, not as far as how much was said about it, but what has been predicted, like timeline-wise, most prophetic things have already happened. It's just the end times that's left to happen. The time of tribulation is what's left to happen. Jesus reigning on earth as king is what's still left to happen. The New Jerusalem is still left to happen. But the rest of that stuff, it's already happened. So, it's incredibly important we understand this is what's left in humanity when it comes to prophetic things. We should understand it with a great depth of understanding. Not try to add to it, not try to take away from it, because I promise you, a lot of you have it in your hearts. And I say that because I've had it in my heart before, and I've been real good at getting rid of it, is you have it in your hearts that you want to be right about stuff. Like you think something says something, and somebody says, well, no, that actually means something different, and you're angry about it. And I know that's true. I know it's true. Number one, because I've been wrong about things, and I do my best to admit when I am wrong. Number two, I see it in the comments, like angry, like why so angry, So I just don't, take that out of your heart. Just be like, God, show me this stuff, because I promise you, you don't understand it fully. I promise you, I don't understand it fully. So if there's something that you're like, well, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it actually says what it says. Maybe when you cross-reference it with all this other stuff, it starts to make sense that I might be wrong. It's important that you have that in your heart, because it's going to block you. If you don't, it's going to block you from being able to really understand. I've shared this in a lot of other videos, but I've always been a scientist. I studied science in college. I was a science teacher for decades. And the thing that bothered me about modern scientists is they totally discredit themselves all the time by assuming they're right. They're calling theories laws. They're calling hypotheses theories. You sit there and you listen to a scientist and he's like, well, as a matter of fact, 65 billion years ago, here's exactly what was happening. When clearly they don't know. Nobody knows. No, just like God said in Job, well, of course you were there when I created everything. You know how all that played out, right? So scientists discredit themselves because they lack this ability to sit there and go, well, I desire these results. I ran the test 100 times. I didn't get those results. That's okay. That is okay. It needs to be okay. It needs to be okay. And I think people really struggle with that. I struggle with it. The first, second, third time I went through Revelation, I come across things and I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense to me now. Like, I kind of thought it meant this other thing, and maybe I was kind of in the right ballpark, but the better depth of understanding is this other thing. Like, it's just important that we not have it in our hearts to have a problem with maybe being wrong. I just think it's important as we go through this book that Jesus said, what you see, write it in this book. It's important that that be in our hearts.